It is Jamey Eisenberg's start of the week, and it is C.J. Stroud, whose Texans are hosting the Colts. Stroud coming off one of the worst games of his career in a loss at Green Bay. He was under 50%, fewest passing yards in a game, 86, but he has shown that he bounces back after bad performances. 7 straight times he's followed a loss with a win. Jamey's got him 6th on the board this week. Dave 9th, Heath 7th. Sportsline likes him even more than anybody. 5th overall, a top 5 quarterback. So let's get Jamey Eisenberg in here along with Heath Cummings. And Jamey, how much of this is based off just the fact that he's shown that he bounces back from bad performances?
Well, I hope he bounces back. You know, I mean, clearly the record speaks for itself, but the statistical performance is going to have to be there. It's really more about the matchup, you know, and he's facing a Colts team that he's basically owned. He's faced them 3 times so far in his career, and all 3 times he's been north of 22.7 fantasy points. I think we'll have another big game from him. You know, the concern would be is what we saw last week without Nico Collins, and Nico Collins obviously not going to play, still dealing with that hamstring injury. I don't care. Colts defense has been beat up by a lot of quarterbacks so far this season. I think we'll see Stroud bounce back in a big way. So you mentioned it, 5 fantasy points last week in that terrible loss against the Packers. He's going to be back to 20-plus points. Should have an opportunity to be close to a top 5 quarterback this week.
You mentioned the matchup, and the one thing the Colts have really struggled with is teams that they don't know if they're going to run or pass. If it's a team that doesn't have a quarterback, they can stop the run. If it's a team that can't run, they can stop the pass. They can't handle it. Teams can do both. And that's been kind of the bad thing for Stroud, is when Joe Mixon's been healthy, he's been scoring all the fantasy points. But I think that Mixon actually helps Stroud in this matchup. I agree, Stroud a top 10 quarterback.
Not only has Stroud bounced back with victories, but statistically he's been great off losses as well, throwing for over 300 yards a game, 15 touchdowns to just 1 pick coming off losses. And he hasn't had a lot of them. I think only 8 total in his NFL career. Let's move on to starts, and you're actually going to go with a quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who has a very favorable matchup this week, Jamey, against the Patriots.
His best game of the season so far, Chris, was against the Patriots in Week 3. He did not have Devontae Adams there. So what I'm hoping for is you got to shake off the rust game between the 2 of those guys. Now we get the full performance of what these 2 are capable of doing, along with Garrett Wilson. But this Patriots defense has certainly not been a stumbling block for a lot of quarterbacks so far this year, unless, of course, you get the run game going, which the Jets have just decided they're going to be, I don't know, we'll run here, we'll run there. Not really consistent with their backs in terms of how they're using Breece Hall. But this is a game where Aaron Rodgers, I think, gets to get comfortable with his receiving course. I like the outlook for him in this matchup. Does have the ability to be a #1 quarterback this week. Javonte Williams has the easiest matchup on the table. You saw a great game from him last week against the Saints. You get another great game from him this week against the Panthers. Rachaad White has 2 things going for him: a beat-up receiving core and Bucky Irving now banged up. So Irving did not practice again on Thursday, dealing with the toe injury. If he's out, then we get Rachaad White and Sean Tucker going from the 3-headed monster to a tandem. But also with the receivers being banged up, no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin, you're going to see Rachaad White involved in the pass game. We saw it last week, 6 catches in the loss against Baltimore. He's going to be one of, if not the best pass catchers for Baker Mayfield until these receivers get healthy, and we know one is not coming back in Godwin. So going to be a big role for Rachaad White moving forward.
I saw Waddle in there. You think Tua's going to hit the ground running this week?
I think it's going to be all systems go. You saw what Tyreek Hill said yesterday. He's like, we're back, baby. Why would you not trust these guys based on what we've seen? Waddle in Week 1, 16 PPR points against Jacksonville. This Cardinals defense should not scare any of the Dolphins or their fantasy managers.
We've seen a really big difference until this year that, like, Tyreek could still perform with the backup quarterback, but Jalen Waddle's numbers have been hugely different. He is a must-start top 20 wide receiver whenever Tua is healthy, and he's somebody you can just forget about when Tua is not there. Tua's back, start Waddle.
All right, taking a look at Heath's starts, and how about Bo Nix on top of things? Wow. Got to be the matchup, right?
It is 100% the matchup. Well, you know what? It's 85% the matchup. Speaking of the matchup, this Carolina defense has allowed 5 of 7 quarterbacks to score at least 20 fantasy points, and they allow teams to just score a lot of points. And you see that reflected in the Broncos team total, 25.5. Who would have thought the Denver Broncos would have a top 5 team total on a week? And when you look at how they've scored touchdowns so far this season, 8 of their 11 touchdowns have been Bo Nix passes or rushing touchdowns. He is actually tied for 3rd amongst quarterbacks in red zone rush attempts. So Bo Nix, a very good chance to get 2 touchdowns here. He's got at least 60 rushing yards in each of his last 2 games. Top 12 quarterback for Bo Nix. Did not think I'd be saying that this year. Didn't think I'd be saying that Kareem Hunt is a must-start running back either, but he's playing the Raiders, who have been absolutely awful against the run. Hunt, 22 and 27 rush attempts in the 2 games since he came back. They are treating him like they don't have to have him last that long because Pacheco's coming back. I don't know how long he can hold up to this workload, but for as long as he's healthy and Isaiah Pacheco is out, you start Kareem Hunt. And I think you start Amari Cooper, man. What he did on 18 snaps last week in his first outing with Josh Allen. Allen should know more of the offense this week. Could be a top 12 wide receiver rest of season.
The other thing I like about Bo Nix, it might be of all the stuff that we've done through 7+ weeks, the boldest call on our site.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's top 12 quarterback. He's calling him a #1 quarterback. I don't think anybody's had him ranked that high in the industry.
And not near as bold as Sportsline, who has him as QB4 this week.
QB4, even ahead of your start of the week, CJ Stroud. All right, guys that you're sitting this week, Heath, and Xavier Worthy is one of those guys. Does that have to do with the trade the Chiefs just made?
Well, I think it's kind of with the chicken or the egg situation here. Does Xavier Worthy's play so far this year have to do with the Hopkins trade, or is the Hopkins trade the reason that he's not a start? He's a big play merchant, and then like he can go make your day in one play, but he also might get 5 targets and score 4 fantasy points. If he doesn't get that big one over the top, you just can't count on him. I think the Hopkins trade shows you that the Chiefs know that. They can't put him into that high volume Rashee Rice or Juju role. Maybe you can do that with DeAndre Hopkins after a couple of weeks. Worthy, if you have to start him as a flex, I think there's upside there. It's kind of the same thing with Raheem Mostert. Really expect Devon Achane to be the lead back and clearly the passing downs back for the Dolphins. Mostert does still have the ability to hit one big play, but I don't think he's going to have the volume, and certainly not the target volume, to be a must-start running back. Not a top 30 guy for me. This Arizona defense has actually been better lately against the run than they have been against the pass.
I think the one thing that's interesting is Raheem Mostert, just because I think it's all systems go. You know, just for Miami. And I get what you're saying. You know, Devon Achane should be the lead guy and all those things. But we saw 30 carries for Mostert in his last 2 games. Granted, last week 11 carries. He lost the fumble. It was a little rough. I can't see Arizona stopping the Dolphins' offense, and he's got those goal line potential. So I don't think you rush him back in your starting lineup, but at least a flex for Mostert. I'm moderately excited to use him.
All right, Jamey sits at the very top of this is Baker Mayfield, which is not surprising considering who he does not have this week. And for the next 3 weeks, you're not going to have Evans or Godwin, who's done for the year. But is this something where if you've got him, you might not use him the rest of the year?
I hope not the rest of the year. You know, hopefully we get some strong performances. And this game still has the potential to be a shootout. Remember what happened the last time these 2 teams met, when, you know, one of the guys that he has sitting, Kirk Cousins, went for over 500 yards. Now Mayfield needs a lot of help to get there, to keep up with it, but he still makes plays with his legs. You know, I think what did Adam Mazer say? He's the #1 quarterback in rushing and passing
touchdowns combined. Yeah.
So he's got the ability to still make some plays with his feet. But until you see it in one game without Evans, without Godwin, it's just tough to trust. So I'm hoping Jalen McMillan steps up. I'm hoping Cade Otton continues to perform at a high level, and Rachaad White. But I think just if you can avoid Baker Mayfield, you do so. Nick Chubb's going to be touchdown dependent against the Baltimore run defense that's been one of the best in football. Tony Pollard taking on the Detroit defense. That's #3 in fewest fantasy points allowed to the position. He was miserable last week in the first game with Mason Rudolph. I don't think he's a slam dunk must-start guy. Deontay Johnson, you know the story. Without Andy Dalton, it's been bad for him, and Bryce Young starting with the thumb injury that Dalton sustained, on top of the fact that Patrick Surtain may play for the Broncos, and he just eliminates all wide receivers. So if you have Deontay Johnson in your lineup, you probably want to remove him.
And the only guy that I would start on that list is Tony Pollard, and it is a terrible matchup, and he wasn't very good last week, but he has looked like himself this year, and he's probably going to touch the ball 20 times, and it's just hard to sit a running back with that much opportunity. He just has to pop 1 of those 20.
All right, that's our fantasy update from Heath Cummings and Jamey Eisenberg here on CBS Sports HQ. What's on the latest FFT podcast, Jamey?
So today we did the AFC home games. Tomorrow we have the NFC home games. We got our mailbag. We got our Sunday morning Q&A where we answer all of your questions. We basically just podcast all the time, Chris. You know, so we're not sitting here next to you. We're just podcasting and podcasting and podcasting. But that's why we help all of our fantasy listeners and managers win their leagues.
They are pod gods over there at FFT.
Week 9 of college football throws up a big test for Navy as they take on Notre Dame. The midshipmen chasing their first 7-0 start since 1978. We'll get locks on that game and a couple others with Mackenzie and Danny Cannell next.